Good evening, dear children. Here's another Christmas story for you. So snuggle up in your little quilts and listen carefully. All the way to Santa Claus. There was a tremendous noise in the castle of Santa Claus. The workers there were getting thousands of toys ready for Christmas. Tops were humming, toy ducks were quacking, rocking horses were rocking, trains were rattling round and round rails, and teddy bears were practicing their growls. Everywhere you went, you could see and hear the toys being made ready by the workers of Santa Claus. Now, one of the little workers was a brownie called Slick. He was the one that taught the jack-in-the-boxes to jump straight out of their boxes on their springs and make people jump. Nobody liked him very much. He didn't always tell the truth, and he was rather sly. "I don't trust him," said one brownie to another, as they worked hard with all the toys. "Santa Claus ought to get rid of him." But Slick was such a very good worker that Santa Claus didn't want to send him away. This was a pity, because Slick had a very daring plan in his mind. He meant to steal the sack of toys that Santa Claus was going to take out with him on Christmas night. This sack was a very magic one. It was a big one, of course, but it was magic, because although it looked as if it could hold about 100 toys, actually it could hold as many as Santa Claus meant to give away on Christmas night. Slick had found out all about this. He had asked Mr. Hessian, who always made each year's sack, how Santa Claus got the toys there. "It's easy," said Mr. Hessian, busy sewing at the big sack. He sewed a bit of magic into every stitch. On Christmas night, a whistle is blown, and all toys stand up. Then they march out of their different toy rooms in a long line and walk straight into the sack. It doesn't matter how many there are. They can all go in. Then Santa Claus ties up the neck of the sack and goes off with it in his sledge. That was all that Slick wanted to know. Now he knew what to do. "I'll pretend there is to be a practice march into the sack this year," he said to himself. "And I'll be the one to hold the sack open for the toys to march in. Then I'll tie up the sack, drag it to my car, and drive off with it into the land of boys and girls. I'll sell the toys to all the toy shops and make a lot of money. How easy." So sometime before Christmas, Slick pretended to all the toys that there was to be a practice march into the sack. "When I blow my whistle, you must all come," he said. He blew his whistle. At once the bears got up and marched, growling, to the sack. The ducks waddled and quacked. The trains rushed in at top speed, and so did all the toy cars. The dolls walked in, and the balls rolled along. The tops spun themselves there, and even the bricks somehow hopped, skipped, and jumped along. As for the toy soldiers, they marched smartly behind their captain, who, with his sword drawn, saw them all carefully into the big sack. It really was a sight to see. "It's only a practice march," whispered the dolls to one another. "We shan't be in the smelly sack very long." But, to their great dismay, Slick tightly tied up the neck of the sack and began to drag it along the floor to the back door, where he had his car waiting. Nobody heard the cries of the toys. It really was very easy for Slick to steal them all. In 2 minutes, the big castle was quite silent, for not a toy was left. No growling, no clattering, no rocking, no quacking. The toys were all crowded together in the magic sack, hundreds and hundreds of them being driven off to be sold in our land. The captain of the soldiers soon guessed that something was wrong. He yelled out to Slick, "Hi! What are you doing with us? Where are you taking us? Let us out. I shall complain to Santa Claus." Slick laughed loudly. "You'll never see him again. You're going to toy shops for people to buy. You wouldn't be put into children's stockings." The toys were scared and upset. They all began to talk at once, and the toys hummed so loudly that it was difficult to hear what was being said. "Silence," said the captain of the toy soldiers in a loud voice. "I have a plan. Please listen, all of you." The toys became quiet. The captain spoke in a low voice. "I'm not going to be sold in a toy shop. I mean to go back to Santa Claus. I have a sharp sword, toys, and I'm going to cut a hole in the sack. I and my soldiers will escape through this, and any of you that like to follow us can do. We will lead you back to Santa Claus." He then came out of a large hole at the back of the sack. He marched out with the soldiers, and they found themselves at the back of the car. It was not going very fast because there was snow on the ground, and Slick was driving slowly in case he skidded. One by one, the soldiers dropped to the snowy ground, and all the toys followed them. Soon, the sack was quite empty. But Slick didn't know that. Oh no, he drove on and on, thinking that he still had hundreds of toys behind him. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. They were in a big town, and they could see houses all around them. What should they do next? "There's a policeman. Shall we ask him the way back to Santa Claus?" whispered the big doll. So they made their way in a long line over the snow to the big policeman. But when he saw the strange collection of tiny things moving towards him, he was afraid. He couldn't see that they were only toys. He thought they must be rats, and ran off to the police station. "Rat poison," he said to himself. "I must get somewhere. What a plague of rats we've got in this town, to be sure." "He's run away," said the captain crossly. "Look, here's somebody else. 2 people. Oh, they're children." Sure enough, 2 children were coming along in the snowy night. The soldiers followed the captain to a lamp post, and there the children saw them, a long line of little shining toys. "Look, Betty, toy soldiers. And oh my goodness, there are dolls too. Hundreds of them. Are we dreaming?" "We must be, Tom," said Betty, "but it's a lovely dream. Listen, this little soldier is speaking to us." "Do you know the way to Santa Claus?" the captain was asking in a little high voice. "Somebody stole us away from his castle tonight, and we want to go back." Well, of course, Betty and Tom made the same answer that you would have made. "We don't know. We know he lives in a castle somewhere in a snowy land where reindeer live, but we couldn't possibly tell you the way." "Good gracious, but we really must get back," said a big doll in alarm. "It's almost Christmas time, and we are the toys that Santa Claus puts into children's stockings. We are not shop toys." "A reindeer could tell us the way," said the captain. "All reindeer know the way to the land of Santa Claus. You don't happen to have a pet reindeer we could ask, do you?" "Oh, no," said Betty with a laugh. "But there are reindeer at the London Zoo, and that's not very far away from here. This is London, you know." "Is it really?" said the captain, who had never in his life heard of London. "Could you possibly take us to the zoo and let us talk to the reindeer?" "It's shut now," said Tom, "but we could take you to the gates, and as you are so small, you could easily slip through the railings. We'll take you to the gates that are nearest the reindeer house." "I don't know how to thank you," said the captain. "I shall certainly tell Santa Claus all about you when we go back, and I will ask him to bring you a special lot of toys this Christmas to reward you for your help." "What are your names?" asked the big doll as they all walked down the street through the snow. "I'm Tom, and this is my sister, Betty," said Tom. "I say, this is a funny thing to happen. I do wonder if I'm dreaming it." After some time, they came to the gates of the big London Zoo. It was quite easy for the toys to slip through the railings. They called goodbye and went into the dark grounds of the zoo. They heard a wolf howling, and they heard owls hooting, and then they smelt the familiar smell of reindeer. The captain sniffed hard. "I smell them," he said. "Their house must be somewhere near here. Come along." So through the zoo, along the snowy paths, went a long, long line of toys, all behaving very well, except one sailor doll, who began to throw snowballs at the soldiers, and even threw one at a surprised bear who had wandered out into his open-air enclosure to see what the line of tiny creatures could be. They came to the reindeer house at last, and they all slipped through the railings. The reindeer were asleep. There were 2 of them, and the captain poked them with the sharp end of his sword. They woke up with a jump. "Who's that?" said one reindeer. "Reindeer, do you know Santa Claus?" asked the captain. "Of course," said the reindeer. "I used to live not far from his castle. I always hoped I'd be chosen to draw his sledge, but I never was. I even practiced galloping through the sky, you know, like his sledge reindeer do, but I wasn't fast enough." "Reindeer, somebody stole all of us Christmas toys from the castle of Santa Claus," said the captain earnestly. "But we escaped, and now we want to get back. Could you possibly tell us the way?" "Well, you want to go the skyway? It's much shorter than any other way," said the reindeer. "See that big star there? Well, you go straight for that, but at midnight you steer by those 3 stars to the right, and—" The listening toy groaned. "We can't fly through the sky," said the big doll. "Oh, reindeer, have you forgotten how to gallop through the air? Could you possibly take us on your back, do you think? Think how grateful Santa Claus would be to you." The reindeer began to get excited. The second one did too. They tried to remember the spell that had to be used for galloping in the sky over the big London Zoo, while the toys watched from below in delight. One of the keepers saw the reindeer in the sky, but he didn't believe it. "There's something wrong with my eyes," he said. "Reindeer in the sky indeed. Why, I'll be believing in Santa Claus next." So he didn't do anything about them at all, which was a very good thing. It wasn't long before the toys were all climbing onto the reindeer's backs. They were not only on their backs, but on their necks and noses and tails and underneaths. There were so many toys, you see. They all managed to get on at last, and then off they went. It was a most exciting thing to gallop through the sky. There was no sound of hoofs, of course. The toys had to cling on tightly because the reindeer went so fast. At last, they arrived at the castle of Santa Claus. And the reindeer stamped up the steps, puffing and blowing and feeling very important. And down the steps came Santa Claus and all his workers in the greatest surprise and delight. "Why did you run away, toys? Where have you been?" cried Santa Claus. "Who are these fine reindeer?" The captain of the toys explained, and there was such an excited humming and quacking and squeaking and growling all around that Santa Claus could hardly hear. "That wicked Slick," he cried, "I'll have him punished, and I'll reward both Betty and Tom, and these two reindeer as well. Reindeer, what reward would you like?" "Oh, please, Santa Claus, may we help to draw your sledge on Christmas Eve?" begged the reindeer. "We could gallop here from the zoo." "Right," said Santa Claus. "Come along on Christmas Eve at about 8 o'clock so that I can get you ready. And now, what about these children, Betty and Tom? I'd better take them an extra fine lot of presents, I think. What is their address, Captain?" Well, will you believe it? Nobody knew. "I forgot to ask for it," said the captain, "and I don't know their surnames either. Oh dear, how will you reward Betty and Tom now, Santa Claus?" "I'll have to look up all the Bettys and the Toms in my Christmas book," said Santa Claus, "and I'll leave all of them some extra fine toys. That's the only thing I can do. Now come along to bed, each of you. You must be tired out." Well, that is the story of how all the Christmas toys were stolen and how they got back safely to Santa Claus. I hope your name happens to be Betty or Tom. If it is, you will be lucky this year. Hope you enjoyed the story, children.